Hey everyone. So if you're tuning into Building Belonging for the first time today, welcome. My name is Eli Cohen. I work for the Office for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging at the City Bar. If you're someone who's listened with us before and you're a fan of the show, you might recognize my voice, but you probably won't recognize me for this podcast. The reason you're hearing from me today is because this is such a pivotal moment in DEI work everywhere, not just in New York City, but every DEI practitioner out there is revisiting their roots, revisiting their guiding principles, really revisiting what DEI work is, and what it is not, and what it means. And there are all sorts of these sort of foundational questions just in the air. So ODEIB is also returning to these questions and returning to some of those foundational conversations. And, as we got underway with those conversations, we realized that we have this microphone in this podcast that we love. And we really wanted to have those conversations about what DEI is, about what it is not, about where it is going, about figuring out who our allies are and how we can move forward in this work. We wanted to have that discussion out in the open with you, because not everybody is as close to this work on a daily basis as we are, but almost everybody is asking these questions. So we're doing something a little bit new with this podcast. In the past, you've probably heard a lot of Tanya Martinez-Galanucci, our incredible executive director, interviewing luminaries in the DEI space, specifically in the legal DEI space, although not always. Alongside Angie Avila Lanciati and Marianne LaRosa. And we're still going to do that. We are still going to be talking to the people in DEI today who are doing the most important work, who have the most important insights and the most important perspectives. We're going to be bringing them in to talk to us, but we're also going to be talking to each other. And we're hoping that you will hear the excitement and the enthusiasm and the dedication in our conversations with each other, because we are having conversations with each other every single day and talking all about what's on our minds, what's in the news, what's going on. We are strategizing and planning and just riffing and coming up with new ideas with each other. And that's really the energy that we want to put out there in the world right now, is that sort of creative spirit, grassroots energy that DEI so desperately needs today. So if you're listening for the first time, we're really happy to have you here. We hope you enjoy this conversation. If you are listening for the second or the fourth or the 100th time to this podcast, we hope you'll stick with us and that you'll get just as much, hopefully even more, out of this podcast in the future. Today, we really started with some of the basics when it comes to answering questions like, what is DEI? What is it not? What is the work? Who are our allies? By sharing our stories with each other about how we each individually came to this work. The answers really were surprising to me. I think it's easy to believe that work like this, people have a moment of inspiration and dive right in. But I think you'll hear from everybody on this podcast that also there's a great deal of luck, and also keeping your eyes open for opportunities to do the work and then trying to slot yourself in where those opportunities arise. And I really hope that people who are listening today hear that and keep their eyes open for new opportunities to get involved and do the work. So you'll hear about me, you'll hear about Marianne and Angie and Tanya, and about how we got started doing this work. You'll hear a little bit about what we are doing day to day at ODEIB. We had a lot of fun recording this. I think you're going to have a lot of fun listening to it. This is, we'll call it the new season of Building Belonging. So stay tuned. Welcome to Building Belonging, a podcast of the New York City Bar Association and its Office for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. Opinions expressed are those of the speakers and not necessarily of the City Bar.
Eli, why don't you get us started talking about how we all came to DEI?
I think I just had technically my 1-year anniversary, although there was a whole lot of startup that happened before we really got underway.
And you've always been part of the team also.
Exactly.
So it's not
it was around February of last year that we made it Facebook official,
Yeah, that's true.
We were soft launching, and now it's been a year since a hard launch.
Exactly.
There we go.
So I was like the communications buddy for a while. And now
And the producer of this very podcast.
that is true.
So like introducing yourself is sort of, people know who you are.
Yeah. And now I'm a full-fledged member of ODEIB, and we've been working on some really fun stuff in the past
Eli, can
year.
you talk about that? About your journey? Like, how did it start? And then
Absolutely.
what made you decide that this was the pathway for you?
I mean, those are sort of two different questions.
We have time. Answer them both.
Yeah, because how did it start was luck. I was here doing podcasts, and then all of a sudden you were here, Tanya. And the first thing you said in like our first meeting was, I want to do a podcast, which I did not prompt you to. I was not like, oh, we should, I didn't have to convince you. I was
Eli,
a podcast
I was
guy,
telling
and you
people
came in.
when I left the firm, before I even started, that I was starting a podcast.
Hell yeah.
Just manifesting it.
Oh my God, guys.
Yeah.
I manifested it. That never really clicked till this moment.
So yeah, we just started doing a podcast. I mean, for me at that time, it was like, I just wanted the City Bar to have a podcast that was its own. Because we had the City Bar podcast, we have the City Bar podcast, but it was like, it's all committees bring us stuff and we make it with them. I wanted a podcast that was, in-house. So that was it for me at that time,
So you manifested it too.
Absolutely. And then it was like, then it's just, you spend enough time in a room with Tanya and you start to really see the world differently. I mean, even just professionally, like I was starting to see other stuff that I wanted to do. Like I had been doing communications for like 5 years already.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know what the timing is like at that point, because this is already, what are you here, 3 years now?
Almost, not even. It'll be 3 years in June. Wild, right? It feels like a lot longer.
Yeah.
Not bad way. I don't mean in a bad way. I just mean we have accomplished so much. We have done so many things. It just feels longer. So I understand why you're like, wait, let me actually calculate the number of years.
Yeah. I think as far as getting into DEI, though, was working on the podcast with you all. And then it was October 7th and the City Bar trying to figure out how to speak on that issue and being part of those conversations and sort of seeing how organizations, institutions not even try to do DEI, but, do this one thing and then struggle with the representative element of speaking about something. And that being a real eye opener for DEI. And then becoming official with ODEIB was sort of all like background, professional workplace stuff. But the first thing we did was start to work on the DEI committee, which was just sort of like, I've been here long enough that I have an idea about how to re-engage the DEI committee.
To focus the mission.
Yeah. So we started working on that. And, now it's been a year and it's just like different projects.
I can't believe it's been a year.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. That is wild.
But it's definitely, you're like, you put in that question, like why the relaunch, reboot,
whatever.
Why the relaunch? It was, at least for me, it was like, I really like and get a lot out of our meetings, are just like meetings where we're talking about stuff and, I don't know what the right edited word is, but like, bitching about everything that is going wrong.
It's
and
messy.
Celebrating all the stuff that's going right. And just like, that's where I learn things. That's really where I learn a lot of stuff. So that seemed like a good way to bring that conversation and that style of learning to the people we're trying to talk to right now.
Oh my God, I love that. And I love this format. I think we can go around and do this with the rest of the team, actually. Just talking about how we got here, where we started. I feel like all roads led me to DEI. Like I was going to do DEI whether I wanted to or not. I took even turns along the way and I still ended up in DEI. I think that my upbringing led me to DEI. I think growing up in extremely poor in a really affluent neighborhood provided me with a lens and a perspective that allowed me to see inequity at a very young age and understand it. I think where I went to school, even at a very young age, going to public school in New York City near the projects with my community, which was mostly Black, really affected my worldview and the teachers I had. I always talk about the elementary school I went to being a place of like real liberation in terms of the education. Like they didn't lie to us. They didn't tell us Columbus discovered America. And I had the good fortune of having Puerto Rican and Dominican teachers and Black teachers. And, when I was learning about my ancestral lands, DR and Puerto Rico in particular, I mean, the fact that I was even learning about them in New York City public school is such a privilege and something that I know so many people don't get. in their education, but I was in a local school with people who looked and sound and had similar experiences to me, and they were able to help educate me and liberate me with that education. And it's something that I try to do when I was a teacher. I was very much inspired by the educators that I had. And so that's DEI, right? Like definitely DEI. I didn't have the word for it. I didn't know
No
it,
doubt.
but that is DEI.
When did
you know,
you
Go ahead.
first encounter DEI as like an expression and a movement in the corporate world?
I don't think I heard the term DEI in that way. And I can't tell you if this is true until like after college, I want to say. I don't think even in college I was using that terminology or thinking about it, even though I would say I did a lot of DEI in college, a lot of DEI in college. And I just didn't have the framework and that language. Not that DEI didn't exist, it definitely did. But again, it's become more mainstream and well known now, right? Like in the last 20 years or so. But in college, I would say environmentalism brought me to DEI. Like I was environmental studies major, and I was most drawn to environmental justice issues, which is DEI. Environmentalism, right? Teaching, right? Becoming a teacher and dealing with all the equity and justice issues, and that also really taught me a lot about DEI. But I think it was really in law school where I realized that this is the terminology that corporate America uses, and so I learned to adjust to that terminology. But my real like study of DEI in terms of the frameworks and the academic stuff really happened in law school. That's where it started, and I was able to take coursework like lawyering for change and things like that. But yeah, all roads sort of led me to DEI, and even becoming a lawyer. I joke about this, but like coming into law school, I immediately was like, oh, this is not what I thought it was. Like I thought
No.
this was about justice, and it's not. But for me, DEI is about justice, and that's why it led me here. So that's my short version.
A born change agent of that.
There we go. Angie, you want to take it?
Yeah, I can go. So I started with OD 3 years ago. Oh, actually, LinkedIn told me that my 3-year anniversary was a few days ago.
Whoa.
Why? But I've been at the city bar for, I think in August will be 7 years. No, 6. I don't know. A while. I've been here for a while. 6 years. Eli, how long have you been here?
I just had my 7-year businessversary at
Dang.
the city
Well,
bar.
it'll be 6 years. It's 7 years for me in August because I came in a few months after you did, Eli. And here's a little deep cut. I remember Eli from my interview 7 whole years ago because Eli was in room 1 and I was going into interview with someone in room 1. It was like my second round of interviews. And I remember Eli because Eli was up at the front desk and I'm like, hi. And he's like, oh, hey. And then as I was leaving, he's like, good luck. I'm like, thanks.
No freaking way.
No.
That's awesome.
That's really sweet.
And I remember you were like, oh, good luck. I'm like, oh, thanks. And then I left and then I got hired. And then I don't think I saw you again for a while until you moved up to the 3rd floor.
Right, which would have been like a year and a half later.
Yeah. And then you moved up to the 3rd floor. I'm like, hey, I know you. But yeah, so I actually interviewed with the city bar almost 7 years ago. I was in the association wing of the city bar, and I just wanted to go into the city, really. I was working in Long Island. I was working at a nonprofit that I really did love, but nonprofits are wild because they love the mission and they take advantage of the fact that you love the mission. So they pay you poorly and they expect you to work 12-hour days.
Speak on it.
Which was essentially what I was doing. I'm not going to say the nonprofit, but I was literally working 12-hour days, driving everywhere, putting so many miles on my little Prius, in the rated Prius. Yeah, and I wanted to just venture out, and I went into the city, interviewed with the city bar. I thought it was somewhere a little bit different, but kind of the same. Stayed with them for a bit. The pandemic happened. Black Lives Matters happened. And that's when I was always, always nonprofit, always in the diversity, equity, and inclusion realm. I was always active in it personally and like via social media and what my interests were and what I pursued. And then during Black Lives Matters, I was like, this is important. Like, I need to be doing more. And a role opened up in this department, and I was gonna apply for it. And then I figured, you know what, let me wait a little bit because we had a big event happening in the association. Like, I can't leave the team now. Like, if it's meant to be, I'll apply again later. And then a few months later, another position opened up in this department, and I made the switch, met Mary Ellen, and then fell in love. And it's been bliss ever since.
Oh,
We got so lucky. We really did. I'm so glad that you made it here, even before me.
I know. And the position that I first was going to apply for was Mary Ellen's position. And then I was like, you know what, let me just take a step back because I didn't want to leave the team during a big event and leave them high and dry. And then Mary Ellen, which, you know what, maybe that's serendipitous. Maybe it was supposed to happen that way.
Because I applied for your position, Angie.
This is crazy.
And then in the interview, James was like, you know, the way you're describing how you like to work, I think this would make more sense for you. I was like, sure, okay.
wow.
That's why, because I wonder if I had applied, like maybe you wouldn't have applied. Oh, so if you applied for my position and I had my position, maybe you wouldn't have applied. See, I was supposed to wait.
Yeah.
I was supposed to wait so that you could come in.
Thanks for waiting.
It's the what's meant for you won't miss you, right? Oh my goodness. Okay, before we turn it over to the real OG of The Office, Mary Ellen, what is something you feel like you have learned or discovered in the time you have been part of ODEIB?
I think what I've discovered, which I've always known this to be true growing up as a first generation Latina with a younger sister with a disability, I've always known people were phony and fake. I've always known that, like on a subconscious level. And I think coming into this space, it was really like pushed in my face how phony and fake people can be. Because I look around, I'm like, aren't we all here for the same reason? Like, aren't we all like-minded individuals? And then you kind of figure out, like, no, we're not all like-minded individuals. So I think the rose-colored glasses really did come off. I think what was known to be true at a subconscious level came to a conscious level. So it's kind of like a dark thing that I've come to realize. But I mean, that's the truth. That's what the strongest feeling that's happened being in this space.
And by fake and phony, do you mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I just want to like ask a clarifying question. Are you referring to like what Kendrick Lamar is referring to when he says they not like us?
Oh no! It's a cultural divide. I'm gonna get it on the floor. You really about to do it? 40 acres in the mule. This is bigger than the music.
Or are you referring to something different?
No, I'm referring to that.
Right. So like the performative
performance.
nature of thinking about these issues, thinking about equity, thinking about fairness, thinking about those things. Yeah, I mean, that's real. And I think the performative DEI that we see in so many places, everywhere, frankly, right? Like, not to say that there isn't real, like, integrous DEI also happening. I don't want to make it sound like that's not happening either. But I think if we really want this to be work that is change work, we have to have space and capacity to evaluate all of it with nuance and be able to say, well, you know, is this doing what it says it's doing? And if it's not, how can we make it actually do that thing?
Yeah.
And really think about what this change work really takes. So, I mean, that is a lot. That's not nothing. And I think that having the capacity to know that and see that is not something everyone has at the moment. So that's dope. Okay, OG Mary Ellen, let's hear it.
Oh, man. So I started in December of 2021. So I just had my 3-year anniversary a little while ago. I applied for Angie's position because that's what was available. I had applied for 1,000,001 jobs. Anything that was open,
God.
I was applying for and was getting nothing
worst.
back. And my
Find your
friend,
jobs.
sorry, what was that?
I was just the applying for jobs is the worst.
Yeah, I graduated into the pandemic and there was nothing. And my friend was like, why don't you apply for a job that like you might actually like? And I was like, that doesn't exist. But they found me this job, the listing,
Wow.
and sent
Whoa.
it to me.
We need to send this friend
And I
flowers.
was like,
please send me their address.
You could do this for a job. You're like, this is a thing people do. I thought I wanted to do HR, and it turns out I didn't know what HR was. I had a skewed idea of what HR was, and yep. So I applied, and then in my interview, when I was describing like how I like to work and what I like to do, I probably used the word coordinating a lot, and the interviewer was like, "Well, I need a coordinator too," and I was like, "Great, let's do that." And then I got a phone call, and I never answered the phone, but it woke me up from my nap, so I answered it, and it was Beth. And so I was like, great, all right, I have a job now. And yeah, it's been, I don't know, I didn't know that I could do this for a job, and like working with this team specifically has been like, I think I've gotten spoiled.
You spoil us. You kidding me? It's amazing. Mary Ellen, going back to your trajectory, Mary Ellen started as a coordinator and is now...
Are you going to make me say the whole thing? Manager of pipeline initiatives and education.
Do you want to talk about what you do a little bit?
Only a little bit.
Take up all, the time is yours. Spend the whole rest of the hour. You deserve it. And honestly, the core of what we do in pipeline is all you. And I don't think people realize just how much you have your hands in literally everything we do. Like from interfacing with students to partners to putting on full educational programming for weeks for so many different types of stakeholders, all within the legal profession. Mind you, Mary Ellen is not a lawyer and can probably run circles around people and talking about the process, what to do and how to become a lawyer. Like, it is just beautiful to watch you at work and see you kind of flow through all the things you're doing. Up to you. You decide how much you want to say.
Well, I think I'm going back to my interview where we were just talking about like how I like to work and what interests me about the work, and like how I was saying I wanted to be kind of like in everything and just kind of in the background and supporting different roles. And kind of how I like grew into I'm in everything and I'm in the background and I'm supporting everyone. And I think my position, because we had to make it, it's still evolving, but that's what I like about it. Every day is different and I get to be kind of in on everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else was the question?
I mean, you answered it great. And actually, Angie, I didn't even ask you because there's things that you do that go far beyond your role, frankly, in terms of thinking about development and communications. Like, I think about some of the work that you've done in creating really masterful infographics and education on really important topics. I think about the essay you wrote about your sister, the Women's History Month. I mean, I don't know if you want to speak on that, but we also have space and time for that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the educational aspect of it is important to me. I spend so much time, and especially during the pandemic, like I would spend so much time saying, and this is wrong, and this is why it's wrong. And like the only person that I could say it to was my then boyfriend, now husband. It's like, enough. Like, I'm so tired of being your focus group of one. Like, find someone else to tell this to. And, you know, and I would explain and I would talk to him. I would try to be like, well, you know, we have to like refocus the way that and reimagine the way that we think about things, because the media spits it out this way, but really it's this way. And like, and the reason why I would educate him is because he's a white man. So, and I would educate him like, everything that you were taught is a lie, and this is why. And again, he was my sounding board, and he was like, I get it, like, please just like find another outlet. And I think that's what this is. Writing the infographics and the essay and the Women's History Month, like all those educational pieces, I think it's just my way of being able to give a different perspective. I mean, this job has really provided me an outlet to not only provide education, but do my own research, right? Like, I can't just say what my opinions are. I have to cite it and I have to base it off of scholars. So it's given me a reason to do my own education and do my own research so that I can provide it. That's a hard project. That's something that I enjoy doing.
I love that.
Do you ever, when you're like doing the research for the different posts, like I feel like I'm like building my own arguments, but I can use this at Christmas dinner. This is
always. And
this is for me.
I pocket it. I'm like, oh yeah, for sure. This is mine.
Angie, can you actually unpack what your sort of like day-to-day is? Not even your day-to-day, but like what your, because Mary Ellen spoke a little bit about what they're focusing on, like in their role. And I think also just like for the listeners who don't know you and know exactly what you're focusing on.
Well, I think that varies. I think if you asked me that months ago or maybe a year ago, it would be about partnerships and collaborations and educational posts, right? Like how we can expand and who we can work with. And that's still the case now. But I think as of today, the focus is more on collaboration and finding who we can work with to fund our office and who are like-minded individuals that believe in our work and pushing out our work. I think my position has definitely changed because of the world that we're living in and because of the threats that our office is facing. Now, what my role really signifies and is important is finding like-minded organizations, like-minded businesses, corporations that will work with us, fund us, so that we are able to continue our work and all the work that Mary Ellen puts forward, because Mary Ellen has such great ideas and really cares about our pipeline programs, brings amazing content to our pipeline programs. I have to find organizations that are not performative and actually want to put their money where their mouth is.
Do you guys mind if I also unpack a little bit what I'm focusing on?
Yeah.
Yeah. I focus on internal DEI at the city bar, which I think is even people at the city bar, even people that ODEIB works with on a regular basis, often don't really understand that ODEIB, sort of formally speaking, is outward facing, we say. We have pipeline programs and we're working in the profession with practitioners to try to improve DEIB in the legal world. But none of that, again, formally speaking, speaks to the DEI at the New York City Bar Association as an organization with, 150 some employees and with 23,000, I think now, members. So the first thing that I started doing with you all was reaching out to the DEI committee at the city bar. We have a DEI committee for members to work on DEI issues that they think are important for the profession and to try to help rev up that committee and tighten our relationship with them and bring in some people who we think are super dynamic and have a lot of great ideas so that there's sort of another power base, another, home for DEI work at the city bar, not just our small but mighty team of, 5 now. And the other sort of major thing I've been working on with Tanya and others is rolling out employee resource groups at the city bar, which we did not have, and sort of seeing all of the internal politicking that goes into doing something like that. And I don't even mean sort of like sinister stuff, just, talking to the general counsel and talking to our outside counsel and talking to the executive director and talking to all the stakeholders and making sure we're doing this right and making sure we're doing it, in a way that is sustainable and making sure that, doing it in a way that is inclusive. And it has not been a straight line. So really like learning as we're going how to do this thing. So that's what I've been working on.
Oh my God. Can we just talk about what you just shared though? Because it is not nothing. And I don't know that everyone knows what it really means to do internal facing DEI like this. And just how much consensus building there is, how much trust you need to build. And I have to say, I couldn't think of a better person to do this than you, Eli, given how long you've been at the city bar, given all the work you've done prior to this. And, you've had your hands in so many different departments and so many different things. I think that part of the reason why we've been able to even do this is because of the goodwill that your reputation brings. And I think people know and trust you. And that's so much of what DEI is about, right? It's about creating trust, being responsive to the needs, creating the space for everyone's voice to matter, and thinking about how we move these things forward. And I'm not trying to say that we figured it all out and we have it all mapped and everything's good. And anyone who tells you that they do is lying to you, because people are complex and you never know what you're going to be dealing with. But that's the whole point, right? I think using DEI as the framework that it is allows us to accept that things are always changing. Needs are always changing. Our world, everything in nature revolves around cycles, right? The pendulum swings back and forth, and it allows us to be responsive to that. And so, I want to highlight what we've been doing, both outward facing and inward facing, is so valuable and important in our profession and in our society, right? Lawyers are everywhere. We can't do anything in our justice system or our legal systems without lawyers. And so the fact that, we're looking internally and making sure that we're rooting out some of these things that we know hold us back, like inequities and systemic issues, down to our staff, makes the work that we're doing so much more integrous. And that's what we're aiming for. We're aiming to do this transparently. We're aiming to bring more people in together. We're aiming to have more space for more voices and more perspectives. So I just wanted to shine light on what y'all are really doing, because y'all are doing the work. What was the question? Sorry, Elise.
So I unpack a little bit for the listeners. You're the executive.
Oh, what I do.
director.
Sorry.
What does that mean? What do you unpack a little bit for the listeners? You're the executive.
Oh, what I
director.
do. Sorry.
What does that mean? What are you focusing
Gosh.
on? What is your,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. I mean, I don't know that we have enough time, frankly, but obviously I'm the executive director, right? So I supervise all of the work that folks are doing here, and am a thought leader in these various disciplines that we're embarking in, whether it's external, internal, interpersonal, personal DEI. I mean, that's a very high level way of kind of categorizing the work I'm doing. Obviously, when it comes to the work I do for OD, that's the traditional work. I'm looking at how we, with Angie, who are our partners, how do we bring them along to the work? How do we expand the reach of this work? How do we make sure that we're working collectively with other pipeline programs and other organizations who have the capacity to see the world in a different way and know we can get there if we combine our resources and combine what we're doing? It's one of the reasons why we're really pushing for getting a National Association of Pipeline Organizations off the ground, right? It's not enough for a student to attend one pipeline program in high school and then expect that kid to be able to get through college and law school and be a successful lawyer, right? We need to be able to connect them to resources all along the way and allow for meeting their needs throughout that journey. And those needs might be different as we go along, right? So that's one aspect of what I do. Another aspect of what I do is kind of doing DEI for the association in many different ways, shapes, and forms, even though, Eli, I think you described the history very accurately. This office was never really built for that, not because people didn't want it or, I'm not putting anything on why. It just, this is what it is, right? And it makes sense. This is not something that's unique to the city bar. There are a lot of DEI offices all over the place and lots of different types of organizations that do outward-facing DEI and not internal. In fact, I would guess the vast majority, and again, that's coming out of nowhere, so please don't quote me, but it makes sense just because of the way DEI evolved and the way it has been commercialized, the way it has been used as a performance. And again, you can do those things, right? It's about the choices you make and the methodologies you use. And it might, for many people, be even a lack of expertise or understanding, right? But that said, some of what I do here is like consulting internally for the city bar, chiming in on the policies, helping get policies off the ground, dealing with really difficult conversations. I am a lawyer by training, I'm a teacher by training, I'm a mediator by training. And so all of those skills are tools in my back pocket. And so I get to use them for lots of different things, whether it's, harking back to, Eli's intro, to October 7th. And when we were trying to bring people into the room and get people to talk, I was brought in to help mediate and help talk through really difficult conversations. And so the podcast is another thing, right? Education is another thing we do. Having the expertise I have in DEI and law, I think is so invaluable to me personally, like being able to kind of see both of them for what they are and what they lack and still make sense of it is something I'm very thankful that I have in this moment in time. And I would love to share it with more people. And I think there are a lot of people like me who are lawyers and DEI folks who kind of see the gaps each have and see the ways that we can learn from our history and do more, do better. I feel like I can go on talking about what I do, but it feels more natural to just talk about the kind of elephant in the room and where we are because, it's wild out here. It's wild out here. And we've been away for a while. I hope everyone's okay. And if you're not, I hope you have space to take care of yourself. But even that is so much of what we do here. Like reminding ourselves, each other, and the world that as important as this work is, and it's important, and it's more important now than ever, it is also important that we are caring for ourselves and each other. And we can't do any of this if we're not caring for ourselves and each other. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if there was anything more I was going to say on that, but that's sort of where I'm at.
Well, I mean, that was perfect. And I sort of want to jump in with a segue because my wheels have been turning a little bit in the background here about how to frame the discussion and what we're doing. And I think we're already well on our way to something where, a lot of this actually came up when I went to the DEI committee office hours, DEI co-chairs, as like one stage of, re-engaging the committee, because we have new co-chairs, was to, have office hours just for people who are already on the committee to come together and talk about what's going on and observe the moment and just sort of share and do that sort of self-care thing, Tanya, you were just describing. And, one of the things that came up was the need, which is, on the one hand, it sucks that this is necessary, but it also feel like sort of an opportunity, but the need to really revisit what DEI is and means. And I feel like that actually is a really good sort of conceptual shell for the conversation we're having today, where it's like, okay, we're at this moment, we sort of need to re-examine and re-articulate what DEI is for everyone out there who is either opposed to it or just confused by it or, reading a lot about it in the headlines for the first time. I actually had a really funny, sort of instructive experience the other day. I went to my bodega where I sort of know the guy at the counter. I know the bodega guy, like every other person in New York sort of has a little relationship with their bodega guy. Well, and we got to talking and it was so weird. He was just like, "You look like a lawyer. Are you a lawyer?"
It could say
There's a lot to unpack there because no, I'm not a lawyer. And, then you got to do the whole shtick about what the city bar is, what it's not, because everyone thinks they're like, he was like, "I'm suing someone. Can you help?"
Well, so you are a lawyer then. Yeah. That's what being a lawyer is like.
So we got to talking, blah, 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 back and forth, like what the city bar is and how it works. And we have members and what I do. He's like, "Okay, so what do you do?" And I was like, explaining communications. And then I said, "I do DEI." He's like, "What's that?" And I was like, "Well, it stands for diversity, equity, inclusion." But, because there's always, them sort of trying to unpack it. But immediately he's like, "Yeah, but like when you say that, I don't know what that means." As sort of, and I hear myself like, you could say, well, it stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And those are pretty big, meaty concepts. And so when you throw them out like that, which ultimately is how we often have to do it, that's how it gets talked about. They don't mean much of anything because they're so rich and complex. They can't really mean anything in the first 10 seconds. They
Right.
can't really mean anything when you just say them as words. They mean a lot, and you need a lot of time to unpack what that is. And that's sort of, I think, one of the things that DEI is suffering from right now is that branding issue of like what it is. And it's because it's so, it can be so many things that I think DEI's opponents have been able to seize on those words and twist them into something that, you know, they don't mean to anybody who's really trying to do this work. There's so much space there for interpretation. So that's all sort of by way of saying, I think the first sort of discussion for us, when I was sort of, you know, was percolating with this whole podcast relaunch, is having a space to talk about what DEI is, like what it means to us, DEI practitioners, what it really is. And that's always kind of been the mission of this podcast.
Right.
And then the first conversation is like, well, let's start with, what are we doing? Who are we? What are we doing? What is DEI here in this room?
Our biggest ops have done such a great job at,
Did you just call them ops?
they are our biggest op.
Wait. I'm so new to this.
Opinion.
Our biggest. Oh. Okay.
Opponents?
'Cause I was like biggest ops as in like opponents or opportunities. Very two different things.
Oh,
So I'm-
yeah. In this realm, our biggest ops are our biggest opponent.
Oh, okay. Now I
Our
will
biggest
register
ops
that.
have done such a great job at letting everyone know what DEI is not. And they have really like,
Through their hiring.
yeah, done a great job at just the acronym DEI into a new way. It's like a new way to say black and brown instead of
Oh,
what
yeah.
it is.
It's the way they use it is as a dog whistle.
That's what I
Yeah.
was going to say, and I was afraid to say it, but you said it. So yes, it's a dog.
Yeah, don't get it twisted. It absolutely is a dog whistle.
Yeah, no doubt.
Absolutely. No, I think I love that this is the conversation.
If I were doing an elevator pitch of what is DEI, my elevator pitch is it's everything you use. It's everything that makes the world more accessible
To everyone.
to everybody, to everyone. And if you don't support or you think DEI is not for you, not important, don't use anything that's accessible. Don't use escalators, don't use elevators, don't use closed captioning, don't use any of that. Don't take sick days, don't take PTO, don't take your hour-long lunch. Like, don't take any of that, because that's a world that provides you accessibility, so you don't get it because you don't believe in DEI. That's my elevator pitch. But again, like, that's my like.
But you know the point that you're making, Angie, if you don't, if I could, and please push back if this is not what you meant. But when I hear you say that, what I hear and what I understand is, don't forget that DEI is civil rights.
Exactly.
Like, you're here, you know, they're going shiny, shiny, shiny thing. And in the back end, in the courts, and with these executive orders, and with these people literally gutting civil right. Right. And I use rights in quotation marks because I saw an amazing quote the other day that was like, if your inalienable rights can be taken away every 4 years based on who's president, they're not rights, they're privileges. And I was like, well, ain't that something? Right? If they are truly inalienable, then they can't be taken away. And so DEI is what bridges the gap between what the law says, or forget about the law in this case, what our inalienable rights are and what we're doing to make sure everyone has them.
Right.
And so, you know, let's not act like this is something that is in a silo, that this DEI thing could be taken apart, broken down, and everything is going to be okay. No, it is literally taking away our rights, all of our rights. Not just Black and brown people, all of our rights are being destroyed, frankly. So I understand why that's your
Honestly, I think
explanation.
that's my definition of it, because in my mind, like, if I am putting it in anyone's face, the people that I would be talking to are not people that are emotionally intelligent, right? Like, I don't have to tell emotionally intelligent people why accessibility is important and why you benefit from accessibility. I don't have to tell emotionally intelligent people that, because they understand that civil rights isn't Black and brown. They understand right is encompassing. I'm talking to people who are emotionally stunted. Sorry.
Wow, that's real.
For whatever reason, right? And that, listen, everyone has healing to do. Everyone has growth and learning to do.
I
So
like
that's
the way, Angie, though, that you sort of, pointed accessibility as something that can capture all of what DEI is, because most people think, when most people hear DEI or think about, diversity, especially, because ultimately I think DEI does sort of get collapsed down to just mean diversity for a lot of people who don't know what
Oh
we're
my
talking
God,
about.
Eli, that is so right. And I think you're right. Like, people just stick on the diversity part. And I'm like,
Right.
actually, and I think you saying that it could all be captured by accessibility, right? I would also argue justice.
Right.
Right. Well, we talk a lot about like, okay, it's really hard to get all the right angles for what is needed. It's not just about getting more, again, because this is sort of the stereotypical view, getting more Black people into jobs. Like, a lot of people just hear that. It's a lot. There are many, many more facets to this than just that. And at the same time, like, each, if you're looking at an issue of diversity, you're going to run into an issue of equity and inclusion and belonging. If you're looking at something that sort of presents as an issue of equity, you're going to hit an issue of diversity and an issue of inclusion. And I think there is, we sort of often do talk about, it's easy to forget because those issues are so present and so forward facing, issues of racial and gender equity in particular are so forward facing. We're like, oh, but also we need to, don't forget about accessibility. Don't forget about people who, experience some disability. And so I like that, actually that issue of access is very much forward. That is something that can capture the whole picture, because if you're talking about an issue of accessibility, you are 100% going to get to issues of racial and gender diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity, like no doubt. And I think that's also something that DEI is really suffering from, is this way that it is like each one of these ideas is a facet of one bigger thing that you can't even really speak to. You just like, each one is an entry point to something huge that is something like justice, that again, like means a lot, but kind of doesn't mean anything because of the way that it's used and because of how big and difficult to unpack it is. So I appreciate the way that you frame that, Angie.
Thanks. I'm just out here talking to people who are Twitter or X trolls, which by the way, I deleted mine. So I'm behind on all that. Anything that I see on Twitter, it's because somebody like posted on Instagram or TikTok.
My little elevator, because I think a lot about this. Like, I'm newest to this game, and I do have a lot of trouble. I have more people in my life being like, oh, what are you up to? I'm like, well, I do DEI now. And they're like, what's that? I get the question a lot, and I don't always know how to answer it. And I think what I'm on right now is DEI is trying to make the workplace more human. Like, do you hate your boss because they don't support you and they take advantage of you? Are you not getting paid enough? Are you not getting adequate health care? Do you have to worry about like people treating you the way you ought to be treated, and do you feel safe and secure? Talk about, safe and secure all the time, taking care of your family and taking care of yourself. And, everybody, so many people have roadblocks that are just like, to hear about them, it's tragic, like what people have to put up with in the workplace. For some reason, it seems like at work, a lot of people are exempt from treating other people the right way. Like that's what DEI is about. And you can't get into that kind of, that is all, I'm putting this in the specifically workplace terms, but you can't get into any of that stuff without getting into issues of racial and gender diversity and equity and inclusion, issues of accessibility for people with disabilities. All that stuff has to come up.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, and I said this recently at the DI drop-in, and I'm gonna try to channel it again. I don't remember it verbatim, but it was something like the ideas that DEI stand for. Let's take away the acronym for right now, for the moment. At its core, it is one of the most innate and human things that we have. And we're all born knowing it. And, if you think back to your earliest memories before you were conditioned by media and anything else, you probably had a sense that you were alive and here and worthy of this life and being a human and all the things that has to bring. You're entitled and worthy and deserving of a fair chance at this life, whatever that means, right? In the US, we call these principles, the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. I think that's probably the closest thing I can, put it to if you're thinking about it in American terms. But this is, as ancient as we are alive, right? It's like the most human thing in the world to feel like we are all equal. We are all here out of our own control, right? We exist and we deserve to exist and we deserve to have the safety and comforts of being that. And that's what DEI is. It's about making sure that we are honoring that. That's my elevator pitch.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Building Belonging. Opinions expressed are those of the speakers and not necessarily of the City Bar. If you enjoy this podcast, please like and subscribe wherever you listen. Find more City Bar podcasts on Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music, iHeart, or at our website at www.nycbar.org/podcasts. Be sure to check out This Lawyer's Life, a professional development podcast where we talk with lawyers about seizing opportunities, learning lessons the hard way, and about what makes them tick. This podcast was produced and edited by Eli Cohen and Dana Ray Tovar.